My name is Diane Butcher and this is Jo Patterson, my colleague, and we both work here at Askham Hall Gardens in Cumbria in the north of England. We have 2 glass houses, 2 polytunnels and quite a lot of raised beds. And then beyond that we have a fruit cage, we have a pond with an orchard, and then a hotbed system which takes up another part of the garden. And then going a little further afield, we have a new project garden called the Hillside Garden, which we started last year, and that is almost allotment style, a lot of beds up there. And the produce from the gardens goes in several directions. First of all, it goes to Allium, our restaurant here at Askham Hall, and then it goes to our other sister hotels.
Yeah, so 3 different types of restaurants. There's a fine dining Michelin star restaurant, another fine dining restaurant which is more of kind of market restaurant, and then there's a gastropub up the road. Diane leads the kitchen garden. I work here 4 days a week, and then we have Sally as well, who works part-time. So we work together as a team. A lot of harvesting involved for the restaurants and continuously sowing and growing produce for the restaurants.
So when I first came here 6 years ago, I decided straight away this would be a no-dig garden. And it's really worked, and we're really happy with that. And it means that we have the raised beds in the kitchen garden here, which we mulch every year with our material that we produce from our hotbeds. We also have in the fields, we use mulching up in the Hillside Garden. Everything we grow from seed. We sometimes pot that on so that the plants are slightly bigger and the root systems have got more accomplished, so that they stand a better chance of fighting the Cumbrian weather, which we haven't really talked about, but the Cumbrian weather is certainly a challenge to us in
location, yeah.
Also, the garden sits under the shadow of the hall, and for much of the winter, this kitchen garden here is actually in shade and can be frosty, where everyone else may have thawed out. The kitchen garden remains a very cold area. So our growing season up here is really short. This year even more so with the late frosts we had in May. And that growing season again challenges us to find other ways of producing edible foods through those months when we can't sow into the ground direct, and we have to use the polytunnels, the glasshouse, and especially the hotbeds, which have been absolutely key to this garden right from the start. And that was just, I suppose, fortune that I came across the hotbeds, and a gentleman in Yorkshire very kindly showed me this system and how it worked, and I started to read up more about it. So the hotbeds are really key, and it's a cyclic process there because the material from the hotbeds ultimately provides the fertility that we want going back into the soil. Feeding the soil is what it's all about. Feed the soil, get your soil in good health, keep the structure of the soil. No till, no dig, it's what we're about.
Late autumn, winter, we'll empty the current hotbeds. Inside them there'll be the material from the previous year, which is partially rotted down, so we move that into another bed, which we then grow courgettes in. And then we need to refill the beds. They're very deep. We pack them full of manure from a local stable, so it's a mixture of manure and straw. So we have to pack it in. We have to make sure it's level, because the level will drop as it starts to rot down, but it releases heat. We build a frame on top of it when it's cooled down enough to be able to plant on top of it and fill that with compost, and then we can plant into it. There's also some covers, lights that we call them, the sort of clear plastic covers, which just give them a bit of protection through the colder months. And we can start sowing very early, which is impossible otherwise here because of the late frosts that we get.
The chefs in the restaurant here, they want baby veg basically, which means we're harvesting young. So when you might allow your beetroot to get to a really nice size, we'll be picking them golf ball size, and the same goes for the turnips, the carrots, the leeks. But what that does mean, in effect, is that we can produce several successions through the growing period, and it's keeping that going. So it's constantly keeping records of when to sow every few weeks, as you would with your lettuces out in the garden. You'd be sowing not all at once, but over a period you'd sow every 2 or 3 weeks, and so it's quite intensive in that case. And records are key, and we keep a lot of dates going. We also produce microherbs. Again, that's quite intensive, but it's done on a regular basis, again, of sowing. And then we also grow perennial crops as well, things like salsify, horseradish.
Lovage is a very popular one with the chefs.
And Jerusalem artichokes, of course, globe artichokes. We're just trialling skirret at the moment. And that's the beauty of this. We're given almost a free rein to actually go out and try as many different vegetables, be they perennial, biennial, annual, as we can. And the other thing we do is we grow a lot of edible flowers, don't we?
Yeah.
We want to make the garden beautiful. We want it to encourage as many beneficial insects as we can into the garden, natural predators. And the chefs come in and they delight in it because they come in with their trays and they'll harvest these beautiful flowers, and we know they're going literally from their tray into the hall and onto a plate and in front of someone. And the feedback we get when people come into the garden the following day having eaten in the hall is just wonderful, isn't it?
When they realise that this is where the produce has come from,
Yes.
the meal they've just had the evening before, I think it really delights people.
It does. More and more people, I think, are wanting that, to know where their food's come from, basically, and the fact that it's here on the land in Ascombe, in the Hall Gardens, means a great deal to them. I would say the harvesting is one of the favourite parts, because all that hard work is suddenly paying off. And we take a lot of care with the harvesting, don't we? We bring it to the sink. We've got some lovely sinks out here. We've got a wash station, as it were, and everything is lovely washed. And we take it in, and we're very happy to put it down in front of the chefs and hope that we can make them smile, because it makes us smile, doesn't it? To be honest, it's a joyful place to work.
Very rewarding knowing that the food that you're growing is getting used and enjoyed by a lot of people, and the chefs appreciate it.
And we also go further than the garden. We go to the woods in winter to pick the wild garlic. We go to get the sloes. Anything we can forage, we'll go out and get for them. And that, again, it's a joy, isn't it?
It's good to be able to provide for them things that'd be very hard for them to get hold of, so they can use it in the cooking and be creative with it.
So the garden has definitely grown quite a bit since I came. Initially, we realised that the one polytunnel wasn't going to be enough, just because we needed to produce more as we were building up clientele in the hall and at our sister hotel. We bought a second polytunnel just over a year ago. We got our second greenhouse, which we definitely needed, because propagation, so much propagation. And then the field was actually a lockdown project, because come March everything had shut, but we were still gardening, and we knew we had this opportunity, and so we grasped it. We walk miles every day, basically. And we even have walkie-talkies now, because if we're in the field, and one of us is down here and somebody needs something, you can end up walking a long way just to find people. And we haven't really talked about the wider garden here as well. The ornamental garden has a lot of edible plants down there. It isn't just confined to the kitchen garden. We're looking wherever we can to find more and more edible flowers and herbs.
Reflect the garden in the house, in the meals and in the stay for the people.
If you've only got a small plot, don't be afraid to try and put in different plants. And mixed planting in a small plot, I think, is ideal. And just also bear in mind, if one's got a deep root and one's got a shallow root, that's better than having them all fight for the same bit of moisture and rain and food that's within the soil. So, I would trial mixed planting, and always put some flowers in there if you can as well, bring in the insects.
For me, hotbeds were quite a revelation, really, because you're getting so much for a relatively small amount of work. You just need an area about 4 foot by 4 foot and a supply of horse muck, so ideally if you've got stables or someone with a horse nearby, because you're making use of everything. You're making use of the heat that it generates, and it also produces beautiful material you can then put back into your garden afterwards, and you can extend your season and grow a lot more. There's a little hillside orchard which we're letting the grass grow around it, and it'd be a little bit wilder. The forest gardens, we're experimenting with forest gardening, so very mixed planting, very biodiverse hopefully, to encourage wildlife in.
And we do allow things set seed in places, like for example the borage this year amongst the potatoes, as long as they're not actually on the potatoes but we've just allowed them to continue, because nature often does it best.
Because we want a long season of produce, there's something flowering right through the year, so it must help the wildlife. We do.
We have rabbits.
We do have rabbits. We try and keep the rabbits out, but we're fairly relaxed about, in the field particularly where we've got a lot of crops, not going overboard to try and keep the wildlife out. We can leave a little bit for the wildlife.
Yeah, we share the strawberries with the blackbirds. There is plenty to go around.
It's in abundance. So I would say one of the things we do to reduce slug damage is we grow plants on in plugs and then plant them out when they're already a reasonable size, so they've got a better chance. If there is a bad infestation, we'll use nematodes. We only use biological control, we don't use any chemicals.
Yeah. We're happy to pick them off
We
the
do
plants
pick them
and
off.
feed them to the hens. As our chef is a passionate breeder of hens, and so we have quite a lot of unusual varieties, and that's very useful when it comes to slugs
Yeah.
and snails, isn't
You
it?
get snacks.
We feed them snacks, yes. And the pigs take an awful lot of our produce as well.
Yeah.
The kitchen waste that is purely vegetative, we feed to our pigs, so they get an amazing diet actually. Even strawberries that are slightly rotten, they absolutely love the strawberries, don't they? I think at the moment we've got quite a lot going on with the new hillside garden and the forest, which we'd actually like to encompass the whole of that hillside garden eventually, which hence planting the shrubs, the different layers, the tree layer, and the shrub layer, and the ground cover and the perennials. So for going forward, I think we don't have the manpower
to expand any
to
further.
expand unless we took on a whole team, because to be truthful, one day we can spend literally more than half the day just harvesting.
There's quite a lot of planting that we've put in, particularly in the last year, that's going to mature, that's longer term planting, the trees, the forest garden, so that's going to mature over time and change the nature of the garden and the constant improving of the soil on the new beds.